everyone, and welcome back to the Weekday Saints podcast. LaQuisha, how are you today?
I'm amazing. Feeling good?
Yeah. I am too, and I am feeling extra good because we get to share this interview we did with Shannon Stewart to the world.
Listen, Niedlov's Bakery has some amazing treats, and Shannon was one of them.
She was one of them. She brought some too when we interviewed her. You know, I think Shannon is one of those people that brings life wherever she goes, and I think that's going to come through very clearly in the podcast. Her light and her love for people and her love for the Lord, and just her vision to see how God has just even got her to Chattanooga. Even the journey to that was really powerful to hear.
Yeah, I loved her energy. She came in just ready to talk, roaring to talk about what God has done in her life and all the different steps that she has to take and all the boxes, right? She talked about her family. She talked about transitioning to a new city. She is quintessential.
Yeah.
Quintessential worker.
Well, we hope you enjoy this episode, and it's really cool to hear how even a bakery can be a holy place that God uses. So enjoy this episode today. Shannon Stewart, thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
No, I was like so excited when you sent me an email and were like, do you want to do this? I was like, heck yeah, put me in front of a microphone. I'd say all kinds of stuff.
Love it.
This one's not a 2-hour podcast, so we're going to try to...
I'm glad he said that because I feel like we could sit here for the rest of the afternoon.
I 100% think we could. Well, we're excited to get to know you. We're excited to hear more of your story. But I would love for you, before we jump into kind of your vocation and the work you're doing, if you could just start by telling us a little bit more about who Shannon is, where you're from, how'd you get to Chattanooga?
Yeah, okay. Well, let me start with how I got here. I'll start in the very beginning. I grew up on the Ohio River in Paducah, Kentucky. My dad had actually grown up in the same town. And so the whole time I was growing up, I was not really known as Shannon. I was known as Dan and Marcia's daughter.
Yeah.
And so I lived there, graduated from high school in the 90s, went to college in the 90s. And so I love all things 90s.
The good times.
The good times, that's right. I moved to a little bitty town in Jackson, named Jackson, Tennessee, in West Tennessee. It was a very small Baptist college, Union University. Because I was a good Baptist girl from Western Kentucky. And if you were a good Baptist girl from Western Kentucky, you either went to school at Union, or if your parents had a little bit of money, you went to Baylor.
Okay.
But I wasn't going to move to Texas. It was just too far away. Because I had never known anything other than Paducah. My grandparents were there. I had the privilege of growing up with my mom and dad. And then my grandparents, in fact, my dad and my granddad worked together. They owned a car dealership. And so my grandparents my other grandparents owned a donut shop. And so everybody in town knew my parents and my grandparents. We all went to church together. It was just an idyllic childhood. There was a lot of other stuff that was going on behind the scenes and under the surface. And went to college, met this boy who had spent time growing up in North Alabama, North Mississippi.
Always a boy, right?
There's a boy, yeah. The ironic thing is there was a boy that I grew up with in Paducah who also went to Union the same time as me. And I was convinced that I was going to marry this boy. And so a fun story about how I ended up at Union is I'd actually accepted a scholarship to Murray State University. Murray was just 45 minutes from Paducah. You know Murray because you went to school at Austin Peay. The boy that I was dating in high school was going to go to Murray on a ROTC scholarship. And I was like, I don't want this to continue after high school. And so I decided that I wanted to follow this other boy to college. And so I came home from church camp. This is going to give y'all an insight into, before we started recording, I was telling you, LaQuisha, about my little bitty rebellious spirit. I came home from church camp this summer before my senior year, and I told my parents, I sat them down, I said, the Lord told me that I need to go to Union. And my dad said, well, if it's from the Lord, he said, then the Lord's going to figure out a way to pay for it, because it was 3 times as much money to go to, a private Christian college. And so ended up at Union. And I dated that boy a little bit, but he ended up being one of my husband's fraternity brothers.
Oh, wow.
And we were in his wedding, and he was in our wedding. So, and we're still friends. So it all worked out. But I met a boy at Union. we got married. You know, that's just what you do. You go to college, you get married, you start working. Well, my husband decided to go to law school, so we moved to Memphis for 3 years, and then he started working at a firm back in Jackson. And so we lived in Jackson until the pandemic happened. And then finally, we were brave and we started asking questions like, what would it look like for us to not live here anymore?
Hmm.
And so we had come to Chattanooga. I had a sorority sister from college who lived here and who had lived here for like 5 or 7 years. And so we'd come here to visit like on breaks and stuff when the girls were out of school. And we just fell in love with the city. And there was just something that was just kind of pulling us here. Now I can sit here and tell you it was the Lord that was pulling us here. But so John just went to the guys at his firm and was like, hey, can Shannon and I move to Chattanooga? Because I had an office here. And they were like, yeah, when can y'all move? And so we had to sell our house and do all that. So we got here in December of 2020, right smack in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
Our girls started school online. Our twins finished 5th grade online.
Wow.
My older daughter finished 8th grade online. They did go to school eventually in the spring, like in person, but it was a wild time. I mean, y'all remember that. It was a wild time.
I don't remember it actually.
You blocked it out.
Yeah, it's kind of foggy.
So it was a wild time. And so we moved here. And so it was hard to start meeting people.
Yeah.
But that was the one thing that I can sit here 4 years later and tell you, God planted us literally in the neighborhood where we ended up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because of that, we met a friend who lives 2 doors down from us who invited us to church. And we had been part of a small Anglican congregation in Jackson. And so we knew when we moved to Chattanooga that we were looking for an Anglican church because that's really all our girls had ever known. And so we ended up going to church at the Mission and slowly but surely started meeting people. And now we feel like, I would say within the last 1.5 to 2 years, this really, Chattanooga feels like home. We're not going anywhere. We've decided we'll probably retire here once we get our girls raised. And, but that's how we ended up here. We just said, could we do it? Yeah, let's just do it. So we did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you have daughters?
Yes. So I have a daughter who is 17. She's a senior in high school. We're about to launch her into the world. She's going to actually do something that my husband ran away from. She's going to go to school in Mississippi for college. She's going to go to Mississippi State. She's going to be a Bulldog. And then I have twins, which, Jonathan, you know what that's like. You have twins. But my twins are girls, and they're 9th graders, Adelaide and Stella. And they both go to different high schools. And so that's been fun this year to watch them kind of still be sisters and still be twins, but kind of grow into their own individual lives. So it's been really cool to watch that happen.
That's awesome.
So I'm actually a little reluctant to ask this question because you've named like 4 different vocational roles, right? As you talk about being a wife, supporting, your husband's career, a mother to these amazing kids. But so what is your current work in addition to that first and second job that you just talked about?
Well, so I work, I started working at Niedlov's Bakery and Cafe back in the summer of 22. And it just I accidentally got a job there. I had been hanging out there a lot. I had another job that was a remote job. And so I was hanging out there a lot, got to know the staff and the owners. And it just, if you've ever been to Niedlov's, you walk in and it's just, you see, it's kind of like Cheers a little bit. Like, hey, everybody knows your name, And I did have, I worked in a restaurant in college and I had, done some other restaurant work throughout my wild career that I've had. But I started working there, and then back in November of last year, of 24, they named me the catering manager. So I oversee all of the catering as well. Yeah. So that's, like I said, I accidentally got a job there.
So I'm hearing you love the atmosphere of Niedlov as a consumer.
Sure.
So much so that being there, the frequency landed you a job.
Yeah.
So what is it that you love about what you get to do?
The people. It's the people. It's like, first of all, Lauren and Eric Zillen, who own Niedlov's, are phenomenal individuals. Like, I don't think that if I could wave a magic wand and create my perfect bosses, it would be them.
That's awesome.
They are just, it starts with them, and then it just trickles down to everybody else who's working in the building. There's not a, when you work some places, there's like a sense of hierarchy. There's like, oh, they're the boss, or they're my boss, or they're this person's boss. There's none of that there. We're all equal. Like I was there this morning before I came over here to record with y'all, and Eric was taking the trash out.
Yeah.
Okay. His name is on the business. He signs our paychecks, and he's taking the trash out. But before he did that, he took his daughter to school, because I fed her some cookies before she walked to school. But before that, before he even went back home to get his daughter to take her to school, he was making bread.
Yeah.
And Lauren's the same way. Like, she's there. I mean, in fact, I was supposed to work tonight, but I had something come up, and Lauren's like, I got you, girl. I'm gonna work your shift. So, like, I mean, that's just, and that trickles down to, I've watched them hire people that no one else in this city would hire. Like, if you looked at their resume, you would say, oh, no, they don't need to work here. But Lauren and Eric are like, oh yeah, they're going to work here. And I've watched them launch person after person into the world.
Yeah.
One of my closest friends at the bakery spent some time in prison. And if you were to stand him and I together, you would not, like, you wouldn't pick us to be friends. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when I first started working there, he and I would have our lunch break at the same time. And so we got to know each other, and he started telling me a story. And I was like, man, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm here. Because it was every single day hearing a story of one of my coworkers or even one of my customers who would come in, and I'm like, I'm here to hear these stories. I'm here to enter into these stories with these folks.
Right.
And just some of the adversities that my coworkers have overcome, like, it's unbelievable to me. And, like, it is a privilege to work alongside of them, to me. And it's just, they will forever have changed my life. Forever.
No, I mean, when you talk about a boss and the culture that's set by a good supervisor.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it trickles down to your experience, the experience of your coworkers, and how you guys interact together too.
Sure.
We know you're in it together because you have someone supporting you.
Yeah.
But I can imagine when you moved to Chattanooga, you didn't think you would be working at a bakery.
Oh, no, because
tell us a little bit about, like, what were some of the things you were doing, some of your vocational stops along the way before you got here.
I laugh about it now because, LaQuisha, you and I were talking about this before we started recording too. Like, I grew up in this town where everybody knew my mama, everybody knew my daddy, everybody knew my grandparents, and I was supposed to be this, right? I'm supposed to be, I was going to go away to college, and I was supposed to come home, and I was supposed to either take over my dad and my granddad's business or, change the world, but that world.
Right.
I was never supposed to not come home. I have a best friend from home who's probably still mad at me, and we've been friends. Our moms were pregnant together. And so she's probably still mad at me. We had this dream of owning homes next to each other, getting married, raising our kids, walking our kids to school together and all that. And she's living that life back home. But I just knew, even like at age 13, 14, I think about that because my younger girls are 15. And I think, do they know now that they're not supposed to come back here? Like, what are they feeling? Probably I ask them too much, but I just knew that that's not what God wanted me to do.
Right.
I knew that he wanted me to go and meet people like I'd never met before. And I started to do that when I went to school. I met people from other countries when I went away to college. I never met people who weren't from Western Kentucky.
Wow.
Like, I never met someone who didn't speak English as their first language. So that was my first introduction. And then when I moved to Memphis, when John was in law school, I mean, Memphis is a melting pot of the South. Yep. People come from all over. And so, because FedEx is headquartered there, and there's lots of other businesses, international businesses that are headquartered there. So I started interacting with people who weren't like me.
Right.
And slowly but surely, God would say, hey, they're safe. They're okay. Even though they're not like you, or even though they didn't have a raising like you, or even though they don't go to a church like your church, or a school like you went to school, they're safe. They're okay. You can be friends with them. Like, you feel a connection with them. That's okay. And that was hard for me. But I started when John was in law school working in a nonprofit. I have a communications degree, which I tell everyone it's the most generic degree you could ever have. So you could have a life like me and pretty much just do whatever you want with it. But so I started working in a nonprofit and fell in love with the idea of that intersection of like where my faith was able to kind of work itself out in the world. Because I was raised in this small Christian bubble, and I was almost afraid of the world. And like I said, it was my time in Memphis where the Lord really started saying, they're safe, it's fine, it's okay. Like they're not.
So can you talk a little bit, because that has to be challenging, like when you grow up and a certain expectation is put on you, or you're around only certain people,
Yeah.
or able to do certain things. There's a challenge. You said there's kind of a rub to safety. There's a rub to uncertainty. There's a rub in trying to understand, how do I move in a space like that? Talk about that, like coming to Chattanooga, because coming to Chattanooga from Memphis was a challenge.
Yeah.
For me, and even though I took a detour, through Clarksville, but like, talk a little bit about those challenges. Like,
Well, so before we moved to Chattanooga, we lived in Jackson, Tennessee for 25 years. Okay, 25 years is a long time to live in a place. And I think if John were here, my husband, I think he would say the same thing. I'm not speaking for him, but I do feel like he would say amen to what I'm about to say. I feel like living in Jackson allowed us to live in complacency, but we didn't realize it was complacency until we moved to Chattanooga. And we had to, for the first time in 25 years, put ourselves out there and make friends, talk to a stranger. Because Jackson, Tennessee only has like 60,000 people. And you live there for 25 years, you know most of those people, like you just do. And so moving here, I feel like I want to draw a picture of it at some point, and I probably will, and probably have Jennifer Edge, my tattoo artist, tattoo it on my arm. But like, it felt like an uprooting. It felt like and it hurt. Like I was miserable for the first year we lived here. If you've ever had any encounter with me, you know that I am a people person. I talk to strangers at the grocery store. I talk to random people on the street. Like I become best friends with people who I just met. And I'm finally learning to embrace that that's who God created me to be. But it was really hard and I didn't realize it because I was living in complacency for 25 years. I recently read a book about, it was kind of a study of the book of Exodus, which like, who the heck wants to read the book of Exodus? Nobody.
well, somebody who's moving
Yeah.
in transition.
Yes,
I would
right.
say like
Well, but I just,
decent amount of moving on
Yeah.
there.
but basically like I can look back, I can say this now because, hindsight, like we can see perfect now. But I just see that God was saying that was your wilderness period. You didn't really realize it. This is your promised land.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And this is where I've been able to watch my children just blossom into who I knew they were. My relationship with my husband was rocky at first when we moved here because I was like, oh, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. Because he was having to build up his office here and build up his, his time with his coworkers and his whole practice. I had one friend in the city, one. And then 2 months in, I had 2 friends. And then slowly I started meeting other people. And the Lord was finally like, open your mouth, start talking to people. And I feel like he was saying, step out of your comfort zone. I know this feels weird. I know you haven't had to do this since you were 18 years old. You know what I mean? And so, but do it. And this is where I'm supposed to be. I mean, literally like, in this neighborhood where we're recording today, like this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that. If anybody were to tell me different, I'd be like, well, I'm sorry, you're crazy. And that makes no sense because the Lord has told me this is where I'm supposed to be.
Seasons where it's difficult, oftentimes we think, oh, it's easy to talk about now, but that's a year of your life in a new place that you had to trust the Lord that you're now seeing the fruit of.
Yeah.
You can look back
Yeah.
and say that was a time of growth, but those are hard seasons to go through.
Yeah. It wasn't pretty. It was not pretty at all.
So you guys are here. You got this job at the place that you love to hang out. Talk to me what it's like to work at a bakery. What are some of the surprising things that you've learned, or things that we might not know about that go with working at a place
Well,
like
if you've
Niedlov's?
ever spent any time with Eric Zillen and you've gotten him talking about bread and how bread is made and how it starts with grain, like I've learned so much. And he uses words all the time. I don't even really know what they mean. A lot of times I just shake my head and say, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And every time he teaches a bread education class in the bakery, I'm sitting in there, I'm taking notes. And he was like, Shannon, this is the same thing I told you 3 months ago. I'm like, I know, but I forgot. I got an old lady brain and I'm just trying to remember. So I've learned a ton about bread. I've learned a ton about coffee. Like I'm not a barista. Like I'm not even I'm scared of that machine. It scares me. Costs more than my car. And so, but I've learned a ton about, how to make good coffee, what makes you pull a good espresso shot and what milk froths better. And, but really, honestly, I've just learned a lot about like true hospitality. And I went to an event last night, actually, and I heard Eric Neal, who is a restaurateur here in the city. And, he's been doing it here for 25 years. And I didn't realize he'd been doing it that long until he said it last night. And he talked about how hospitality is like a personality almost. And I think about when I go into his restaurants, I feel that sense of like, hey, I'm so glad you're here. And I feel that way about my job. And I feel that way not just about my coworkers, but I also feel that way about our customers. I've watched customers get engaged, get married, have children. I've watched people lose family members. I've watched, I've watched my coworkers go on to do bigger and better things. I have one coworker who, when I started working there, he was a mess. And like, but Eric and Lauren believed in him and they were like, we're going to teach him these skills. And even just the basic skills of like coming to work every day, clocking in, being on time, showing up. And, sometimes he wouldn't do it, but Lauren and Eric would give him another chance. And now, he is working at Volkswagen, has an amazing job, and he's recently gotten custody of his kids back.
Wow.
And just to like watch that and to see like how even just, having a conversation with him about parenting, he's like, what should I do in this situation? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, it's been a long, his kids are younger. And I was like, man, let me think back to that time. And I think the Lord has just been able to use every single thing that I've gone through in my life just to be able to pour into the lives of other people and not be afraid to tell my own story. And I think too that, one of like I said, I've learned about bread and coffee, but really just the way that Eric and Lauren live their lives. It's a business for them, obviously. They want to make good bread. And the reason they want to make good bread is because they think that everybody in the city, no matter who you are, no matter your socioeconomic status, no matter where you're coming from, they want you to have good quality bread.
Yes.
And they make it happen. And it's just like, I just feel honored and privileged to be a part of it. Just to, wear my Niedlov's t-shirt in public. And, it's just an honor.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So what motivates you every day? I mean, this is like, it's one thing to love what you do, to love the people that you work for, kind of hearing their heart for why their business exists. But for you, like, what is the thing, like God has threaded this needle through life for you that led you here to Chattanooga? What's motivating you every day?
Just my love for people. And I think a lot of therapy and just a lot of soul searching has helped me realize that God created me to be this outgoing person. And I think probably the first 25 or 30 years of my life, I was trying to live into this box. Like, like I said, I was a good Baptist girl from Western Kentucky who grew up in the same town as her dad, and so I was supposed to be this way. And so I spent all these years trying to be this way. And I wasn't, I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was living out my purpose.
Yeah.
And like I said, with a lot of therapy and a lot of soul searching, a lot of prayer, a lot of like seeking counsel from other people who were ahead of me in life, just really my love for, and I just realized that like I just need to begin to meet people where they are. And that's what motivates me, just my love for people and just hearing their stories. And, you know, sometimes it's a kindness towards me when people begin to tell me their story. They honor me by telling me their story, and they allow me to kind of enter into their story. And that's like so beautiful to me, just to be able to, you know, hear what someone's been through. But even when they're in the middle of it, just hearing them go through it, the fact that they trust me enough to hear what's happening. Like one of my coworkers, he actually now cuts my hair. He left working with us at Niedlov's and went to barber school, and now he's a barber. So he cuts my hair now, which is kind of cool. But I remember one day I was a customer still. I hadn't started working at Niedlov's yet. And I could just tell he wasn't himself. He's a young kid. I mean, he's like 23 maybe now. He's about to get married. And I could just tell he wasn't himself. And I was like, Louis, what's going on with you? And he was like, this and that. And I was like, well, let's pray about it. And I can tell we were sitting in that back corner by the window, you know, the table at Niedlov's. I was sitting there with my computer and I said, sit down, let's pray about this. So we prayed about it. And at that point I had made a connection with him. Like he was like, oh, like you don't really know me that well, but you took a minute and you prayed for me. Well, you know, about a year later I started working there, and I was behind the counter one day, and he came in with his aunt. He's a Memphis kid. He grew up in Memphis. And he came in with his aunt one day, and he was like, hey, this is Shannon. She's my work mom. And I started weeping because I was like, I'm a mom to him, you know? And like, I just thought he was just this kid I worked with, you know? Like I just was myself. And I think as I've gotten older, I've just leaned into like this person that God made me to be.
Yes.
And like, if I could say anything to my like 20-year-old self, I would say just lean into who you know in your heart that God has made you to be.
Yes.
Don't be afraid. Who cares what other people think? I mean, I know that's easy. I'm almost 50. Like, it's really easy for me to sit here and say, who cares what other people think? And I say that to my teenage girls all the time. And I'm like, I promise, if you just keep leaning into, because he created you the way that he did. He created your face to look the way it did. He created your hair to be wild like it is. Like, it's for his purpose and his glory. And when you can walk in that, listen, it's like, I don't know. I mean, you know, you guys are doing it. You're doing it too.
It's amazing where the holy moments show up.
Yeah.
You know, you just talked about a back table
Yeah.
in a cafe where the Lord just showed up in a moment that knitted you together with this young man.
Yeah.
Right.
To where you didn't even know at the time what that meant for that relationship.
No.
Sir.
Gosh, no.
And it's just God's on the move.
Yeah.
And what I hope, you know, as people are listening to this podcast, we really just hope that you'd have a chance to go. It's not just happening at Niedlov's.
Right.
That wherever God has you right now, whether it's your dream job, the thing that you never would have imagined, that God can use you there. Is there a verse or that just that floors you or keeps you moving in your life?
So I alluded to it a little bit earlier, not the verse, but like when I said when my husband and I, when we first got here, our relationship, it just was like, I was like, you moved me here, even though it was a joint decision, but I want to blame it all on him, the reason I was miserable. But even when I was in college, as a result of some of the experiences that I had growing up in my home, as a kid, some of the trauma that I experienced, I kept thinking like, why did I go through that? Like, why have I experienced this? And I was a junior and I had just met my husband. I knew he was my husband. I don't think he knew that he was going to be my husband, but I knew he was going to be my husband. Yeah. But our school, I went to Union and they put out this little weekly devotional and they would put it in our mailbox. You remember your mailbox at school? You get so excited. So they put this little devotional in our mailbox, and this is only the Lord that I've been able to hang on to this. But it was a little devotional on Romans 5. And I thought, wow, like my suffering can mean something. Like my my childhood, some of the hard things that I went through, can mean something. And the reason why they can mean something is because my suffering produces the perseverance in me.
Yes.
And that perseverance has developed my character. And that character, brings out that hope that only Jesus can give us. And so after John and I went through that really hard time, that verse and our marriage therapist helped us through that time, knowing that that hope that Jesus offers us does not disappoint. There's a couple of different translations that I love, but the one that I love the most, it says that hope does not put us to shame.
Wow.
And a lot of my past was wrapped in shame because of the way I was raised. There were a lot of decisions that I made, or there were a lot of decisions that other people made that affected me. And so I carried a lot of shame into my 20s and 30s and my 40s. And again, with the help of therapy and the Lord and my husband and other friends and family kind of rallying around me, they were like, no, hope does not put us to shame. And so because of what I've gone through, I know that my suffering has developed me into the person that I am and has given me empathy for people who are going through things.
Yeah.
One of the things I tell my girls all the time is proximity produces empathy. And so the only way that you can understand what people are going through is to sometimes you just have to get in there with it with them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's messy and it's gross and it's
Painful.
And I was taught, you don't want to get close to those people because they might rub off on you. Well, guess what? Sometimes they do, but not in the way that I was taught. Sometimes watching them, like my coworkers, watching them struggle to get custody of their kids back, or watching them, deal with a chronic illness, or watching them deal with time in prison, and that's on their record. Like watching them deal with that. I have coworkers that are struggling with their sexuality, and watching them deal with that, and the closeness that I have with them has allowed me to develop that empathy muscle and to not be judgmental, but instead be curious, like, hey, what brought you to that point? And I think too, it opens so many doors for me to be able to tell my story.
Oh.
When you ask people questions instead of judging them for maybe the way they dress or the way they wear their hair, or whatever, it allows you to just become curious about people. So if you encounter me in public, I'm going to ask you 100 questions. So just be ready.
Yep.
Yeah, you'll get about 56 with me. I love it.
But yeah, and I mean, I love that scripture so much that
Yeah.
I tattooed hope on my arm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And John, if you ever see my husband, when we're holding hands, he has the same tattoo.
That's really
I also have a tattoo of rosemary garlic bread from Niedlov's on my arm as a reminder that is my favorite bread.
that's cool.
But I feel like, because people, I mean, that's a way to start a conversation with
Yeah, it
somebody.
is.
They're like, what do you hope about? I'm like, oh, let me tell you about the hope I have. Because there's nothing like it.
I grew up a good Presbyterian boy, and one of the
Okay.
theologies we believe in was the priesthood of the believers.
Yes.
That as a Christian, because Christ lives within us, we get to be a little small picture of Jesus throughout all the time in the world.
I married a boy who grew up a
Yeah, you
Presbyterian.
married a Presbyterian boy. And so I just think, as you're describing the way you get to interact with people and how your story shows up and how it opens doors for you to see who they are and to talk truth into their life and speak about Jesus, that's you being a little pastoral role, even in a bakery.
Yes.
And I just can't help it, if we're talking about bread and coffee and drink, to go, you guys have an amazing shop. And the reason isn't it's the biggest shop. It's not the most decorated shop in town, but there's a line out the door every day. And people come in there because they feel known. They're going to get quality bread, and they're going to have community. Some of the most important conversations in my life since I've lived in Chattanooga have happened at Niedlov's.
Same.
What a beautiful picture of the feast to come.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh God.
Of the feast to come from the bread of life.
Yeah.
The simple bread is this simple thing, right? That you guys, but it's so complex at the exact same time. That we get to partake in, and it's a reminder of this beautiful feast from the true bread of life to come one day. So anyway, it's a beautiful thing.
No, it is, and
part of
it's
that.
when I drive home at the end of my shift, I think, wow, that was just so awesome. I've worked since I was 14. I've never in my life felt like that about a job ever. And, I joke with Eric and Lauren, I'm not going anywhere. Like, if Niedlov's to get sold, or you better work it into the contract that I'm coming with the business, like I'm not, and it's just so, and I wish, and it doesn't have to be at Niedlov's. Like, so everybody doesn't need to come get a job at Niedlov's, which we'd love to have you. But like, it could be anywhere, in any job where you work, because like you said, we're all little pieces of Jesus walking around here, right?
Right.
And so whether you're working at the hospital, whether you're working at the barbershop, whether you're working in a school, whether you're, whatever you're doing, like, you're to do it for the glory of God.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
And he's created us. All of us are so different. Like, I think, oh, I got to be like so-and-so. I got to be like, no. Nobody wants carbon copies of other people.
That's right.
He's called us to be our individual selves. And so I think when you realize that, it took me a while. And I've had to apologize to a lot of people in my life, my children, my husband, my family. But I've spent a lot of time like talking to the Lord about it. I'm like, I'm really sorry that I didn't pay better attention to what you were trying to tell me. Because I let all these other voices tell me what I thought I would. Yeah, I let them be Holy Spirit. Right. I didn't listen to what Holy Spirit was saying to me.
Yeah.
Right. Bread comes in assorted varieties. They're different tastes, they're different shapes, they're different textures. They all are substantive, but all of them serve a different need. Like, I want to think about, like, y'all start talking about bread, now my mind's going, but just listening to the sortedness of your story, right, is made you into what God would have you to be at this point in your life. And there's still more story to come.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're extremely grateful to hear just a piece of the story that you've shared with us. It does feel like substance, because here in this city, a lot of people don't get to taste some of the varieties of God's creation. Yep. And so that's why we have these conversations. God cares about every single person, all the work that we do. And we just want to elevate that. So we just thank you, Shannon, for coming in.
No, I told Jonathan this one Sunday at church. I pulled him aside. I was like, listen, y'all's podcast, I've met so many cool people because of it. And so when y'all asked me to come, I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to.
And you can come back whenever, especially if you bring Niedlovs like you did today.
No, I will definitely. I hardly ever walk into a room anymore without bringing a box of something.
Well, thank you, Shannon.
Well, thank y'all.
Yeah. LaQuisha, I like talking about bakery shops. Made me hungry, but it also made me just so thankful for a place like Niedlov's that hires folks that care about the craft, but also care about the people that walk through the door.
Yeah, you talk about the bread of life, right? You talk about this community that existed. She talked about her coworker with such passion and zeal, and she talked about it from a sense of like valuing the work, but seeing the person. I think that was so important when she said that even though that this is her function of her job, that it's more than that. That even if she couldn't see herself not working for this particular bakery because they become a family. Yeah. And I feel that when I go into Niedlov's, I feel like a welcoming spot for me to pop up my computer, and that they're going to be like generous and they're going to care about why I'm there and serve me in that manner.
One of the things that I've starting to pick up a theme is oftentimes we end up talking about legacy when we interview someone, that their family pops up in the story. And for Shannon, she talked a lot about where she came from. And even I thought it was fascinating, her talking about how her family had owned a donut shop that she worked in. And now full circle, God has her in Chattanooga, a new city, and she's working at a bakery. It's almost like this is part of who she is and what it means for her to serve is to be a part of something like that.
Listen, for her to serve, right? Yeah. That is such a humbling position, to be able to see yourself as a servant, not just of a particular food idol, but she serves the community in such a way. When you walk into Niedlov, she's a pleasant face. She's concerned about if you come in and you're not, you're a regular and you're not yourself, she would notice that. And I think places around town need employees who help build community, because they know the people that walk in beyond just being a customer. there's somebody that's part of the community, that's part of family.
Well, I'm glad to know Shannon, and you need to go say hi to her over at Niedlov's. If you're listening to this, go check out something from their shop. They got amazing stuff, good coffee, a lot of good things. But thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Weekday Saints podcast, and look forward to having you on our next episode.